We've got a great panel, Robb, David, and Murali. I'm going to go just down the line. We'll start with Murali, introduce themselves, and give you a little bit of background. By the way, I'm Chuck Doerr, President and COO of OpenFin, CIO of OpenFin, and we're super excited everyone's here. Murali.
Hello, everyone. My name is Banda, or Murali Banda, as you call it. I work for BMO Capital Markets. I run the UI tech. I joined BMO about a year ago. So we're on a journey to integrated desktop experience with interoperability. We're partnering with OpenFin. They are pretty excited about where we are going there. Prior to joining BMO, I was at Citi for about 17 years, running the UI tech for equities, cash, middle office, and high touch. So that's me. The fun fact is this is my first time I'm speaking, so.
And he did a great job, right?
Great job.
There you go.
All right, David.
I'm David Kamp. I am the CTO at Versana, which is a startup in the syndicated loan space. We're backed by a consortium of banks, including JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citibank, Credit Suisse, Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, Deutsche Bank, and US Bank. Got them all. If I missed anybody, 8, that was good. We're really focused on trying to bring together the agents and the lenders in the syndicated loan space. It ties into the agility because of where that asset class is today. One of the things that we're thinking about and how we're looking at agility from a more technical perspective is really focused in 2 areas. And we'll talk about some of them today, but we're thinking about it from a cross-functional perspective, going beyond the full stack of developer and trying to bring in the front, the back, both QA and DevOps into it to try to create a very strong team of players. As a startup, we're trying to be very focused and thoughtful about how we use our resources, as I'm sure everybody here is. But creating that full stack engineer is important to us. The second is that we're not going to build everything. Partnership, whether it's in the UI with a licensed product or an open source product, is extremely important to try to provide business value to our clients. So those are the couple of things that we're thinking about from an agility perspective.
Awesome. Robb?
Hi, I'm Robb Keayes. I'm an enterprise architect at Nomura. Been in the financial services industry for about 20 years and fixed income mostly. Have recently become an enterprise architect, and my focus right now is on the UX UI space. I have a number of hats that I wear, but one of my main priorities right now is looking at UX UI modernization for our firm. We're generally a C# .NET based firm. We're looking to transition more aggressively into web technologies, and my remit is really to try to figure out what that transition looks like and what the best path forward for us is going to be, leveraging a platform like OpenFin. How do we do that to, deliver them as much value as quickly as we can, still give people flexibility to, build the applications they need.
Fantastic. So why don't we stick with you, Robb? We chose this business agility focus for the title here. Why is that the target, and what is it about the UI layer that really is a key area for us to focus on delivering that business value?
That's a good question. Thank you. Thinking about delivery, of applications in general, I think we've seen a change in the way technology is built in the back end, microservices. Yep. There's just a change. You've got agility, you've got agile, you've got DevOps, you've got microservices, and the way we build and deliver software has changed. And I feel like the UI hasn't kept up with it. And so I've been a server-side developer for a long time, and now I've taken over the UI space. I also do UIs, of course. But just thinking about taking that experience and seeing how can we almost be more agile in the way we build and develop the UI components, but then also how do we build a platform on which they can run easily so we can just hand it over. I'm thinking of UI as a service almost. I just coined that, but something like a platform as a service for UI. That's what my thinking is at the moment.
Yeah, the modularization of UI is,
right.
Giving people a framework to operate off of.
Right.
David, how do you think about this stuff?
So I think as we think about agility on the UI, I'll touch back on some of the points I mentioned before. How do we create value or provide value to our clients quickly and not have to rebuild everything? So whether it's going and looking at a third-party product, how do we tie the teams together? How do we build the right, I'll call them architectures or frameworks as we look at it, so that the teams can focus on application level functionality? We don't need to continue, and I've seen this numerous times over my career, where somebody can go and build it better. And there's no doubt that as technologists, there's 100 ways to skin a cat. But we need to start having more of a mindset of providing value to our clients, to focus on the business value that's there and not just building a technical solution to something. So as we do that, what are the best of breed products that we can leverage? Going back to, if OpenFin is going to provide OpenFin everywhere and they're going to hit the tablet or a phone, terrific. I don't need to now go build notifications to have on a phone. Could we? Absolutely. But is that going to provide a different business value to our clientele, or should we focus? I keep hitting that mic, don't I? Should we be providing business value around the syndicated lending space and thinking about how we can add value there? And that's what our focus is. So how do you bring in third-party products? And then once you have it within your doors, how do you leverage it? How do you take the team that you have in place and allow them to continue to build around it? There's everybody's familiar with open source and has been using open source for a while. There's starting to be more of a groundswell behind using inner source or building your own open source and putting the right governance around things so that the different members of your team can start to build upon what others have done, but putting the right governance structure around it. They can become contributors. Once again, as a startup, we're very focused on getting all of our resources fungible and focused on things, but that means they need to touch a lot of different things. So providing that governance layer and thinking about things from an open source perspective, where we've all been involved in that recently, you can start bringing that in-house. It's basically a private open source, and that will hopefully provide more agility as well to us.
Anytime someone says best of breed to me, I get excited because it means they need to integrate software. And everyone who knows me knows that I love integrating software. With a wide remit, with a sort of architecture role, and sort of trying to provide the framework for delivering this business agility. Murali, how do you deal with vendors coming in? You've got a lot of teams. There's a lot of people that are trying to deliver software from your firm onto a given desktop. Internal teams, external teams. How does that work? How do you think about that?
Well, like I said, we just started our journey towards the integrated desktop experience. So I cannot be telling all the UI teams to wait for a couple of years, till we build everything, right? I mean, there's been a lot of innovation. Like I said, partnering with OpenFin on the UI side, but there's a huge untapped potential on the back end, right? As we build the front ends, there is a huge demand with all these UI teams. You mentioned a lot of teams, right? So they all have their own business agenda. They all have their own business requirements to cater to, but then they all have something else in common, right? So they have user preferences to manage. They have notifications, and they have workspaces to manage. They have layouts to manage. So if we all do our own thing, then it's going to take ages for us to build that, right? So I think we all collectively need to transcend the UI boundary and then standardize some of the, and make it a commodity, like Rob mentioned earlier. So UI as a service, including the front end and the back end. So we are getting there. I know Mazi is somewhere in the audience here, but we had a good meeting this afternoon. So we're going to get there pretty soon. So that's pretty much where we're getting at.
So I've always felt like the UI layer is from a developer standpoint. I'm an engineer by background. It's it's a dirty place to operate. I always liked the server. Back when Mazi and I were in the trenches writing code together, right. I somehow managed to force him to write the UIs, and I got to do the back end. I'm still super proud of that. He's got a great design sense, so our UIs were good looking, and the back ends worked. Rob, when you think about sort of, again, like tying this back into, like, how does technology agility translate into, business success, business agility?
That's an interesting question. Thank you. Technology, what do you mean by technology agility specifically?
So, so one of the things I believe is, if you can get stuff out. So Murali was talking about how there's like a servicification of the UI, right? That means developers are having to make less decisions on their path to putting UI in front of an end user, right?
Right.
What does that do? Does that compress timelines? Does that allow us to get better feedback? Does that, how does that shape what we deliver?
I think it's more of a question of standardization to some degree. And just getting back on the topic of commoditization and inner source, actually, it's one of the platforms we want to use internally as well, is just making it easy. I think it really comes down to making prescriptive but flexible technology choices. We have a sprawl of technology at Nomura. We're trying to bring it in to try to maximize value so we can have fungibility, hiring, all the good things there, reusability, inner sourcing of common components. And just kind of trying to build a platform that then when people come or teams come to use it, they don't have to worry about their back-end services. They don't have to worry about their layouts. They don't have to worry about a lot of the things they usually have to worry about. I'm of the mind that people should not ever be writing REST API calls themselves. We just provide layers for that and that sort of thing. And by making these kinds of decisions, I think what it does is it frees up, it just goes back again to technology modernization in general, in that developers can then focus on building the UI and not focus on all the plumbing and all the bits and pieces that tend to take, half the time and 60% of the bugs. Just trying to...
Can I just add something to that?
Absolutely.
Agree with everything that you said. One thing that I think everybody needs to also be thoughtful of, and one of the challenges sitting, building a platform or multiple platforms is, if we create the standard and we start to force different teams into using that, we're not necessarily going back to what I said about best of breed and potential integration. But I like thinking about things from the perspective of what is the right tool or technology to solve a problem. Otherwise, you get more sprawl by telling a team, this is the standard that we're going to have, this is the technology that we're going to use, and then having them have to modify or create more. Is spaghetti code a technology term?
I think it is.
Sure. Okay.
I think it is.
So creating more debt for ourselves as we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. So I think there's that fine line between how we're trying to create the standard and the pattern for the teams to use, at the same time trying to solve what the right way to do something is. So it's just something we have to be thoughtful of as we push forward with that.
Let me quickly respond to that. It's a great point. I guess another part of the platform that we're coming up with is we're an old firm. We have a lot of old software, a lot of old UIs, and we need to modernize them. So this new platform we're coming up with, this strategy is not to say, all right, you must move now. It's like, okay, you can keep your application, and when you start to move, we're going to give you well-defined migration paths. And this is the tech stack. There's some flexibility, but this is the tech stack. This is the architecture we want you to use, and here's your migration path. And you can go big bang, or you can just take baby steps. But then I think it solves the round peg and square hole problem, because we're not mandating that you must move immediately. People can move at their...
Right. So Murali, we've got a couple banks. We've got a vendor, right?
Yeah.
One of my beliefs is when you're going down this path of modernization, like, there are things that we used to build that we shouldn't build anymore. We should be using vendors, best of breed vendors, right? And dropping them onto the desktop and, using the glass to integrate some of those things, right? Of course, we got to do some heavier server-side integrations at times. But when you think about, like, bringing together a mixed environment of internal content, external content, and creating that experience for the end user, like, what are some of the challenges that you see there?
So some of the challenges have already been tackled by your workspaces, right? So you demoed that earlier today. So some of the challenges are interoperability, for example, and the cross-browser interoperability or compatibility there. But when it comes to integrating all the UIs together, there is, first of all, they don't look the same. Right? So there is the UX part, and there is the UI part, and then there is the backend part. So there is 3 problems we need to tackle there. Now, if there is a marketplace where everyone puts their stuff and then they all magically work together, that'll be great, but we're not there yet. It's the nirvana state. But then, if you are bringing vendor software together and, the UIs together, the backend together, who is going to maintain all of this? Who is going to make it work, all of this? We have multiple vendors, but then who is going to make it into an integrated experience?
Right.
I think that's where OpenFin comes into, being there. Yeah.
Thank you for the plug. I love it.
Yeah. I've already mentioned it 3 times.
We're at the tail end of the panel here. I'm going to give you guys each an opportunity. Just give us a little tidbit on the way out. A final thought. We'll start with you, Rob, and just come down the line. I won't even jump in. So just follow each other down the line. Rob, go.
Okay. I'd just say I'd like to touch on the inner source piece. I think it's underappreciated. I see this as a key leverage for us to change the culture. Actually, that's what I wanted to say. Culture change is one of the big things that we need to change. We need to move to a more generally agile. People do agile, but not necessarily are agile. We're getting there. And changing the culture, making it safe to innovate, making it collaborative, reusable. Inner source is such a huge aspect of that. And I feel that that's how we get the UIs to move as well. Maybe it doesn't seem connected, but by getting people involved, then you can build community, and then you get more standardization and more voices.
Awesome.
I'm going to say 2 things. I'm going to touch back on the inner source again. And if people haven't started thinking about it or using it, it's also a great way to retain talent. To silo someone onto a specific platform or say they can't touch a piece of code, it keeps them from expanding, learning more, and being creative in what they're doing. And having inner source with governance around it is a great way to do that. The tidbit I'll touch on at the end, I'll say, is touching on your culture point, is really the business value. Partnering, finding the right tools and partnering with them so that you don't have to continue to build everything is the place I would go from an agility perspective.
And like I said, we need to go beyond the UI boundary. It's good that you're going into the devices, but then we also need to get into I think it's a collective responsibility to get into the back end and commoditize everything together to make it one solution, actually. So I'd like to see us settling down on 4 or 5 options in the industry instead of doing our own thing. So that's where I'd like to go.
Awesome.
Right.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Murali, David, and Rob. Best panel so far.